PolyAnagrams is a new tabletop crossword game in which players take turns as they build a crossword grid using letter tiles. In this video, I will describe how it differs from the leading game of its kind, which is Scrabble. The first difference, and it is huge, is that in Scrabble, each individual letter has a point value ranging from 1 to 10. There are also two blank tiles that don't score any points but can stand for any letter. By contrast, each and every letter in PolyAnagrams is worth 1 point, and so is the single blank tile. The second and most obvious difference between the two games is that in Scrabble, scores for individual letters and for entire words can be doubled and even tripled if they are placed on certain premium squares. As a result, gameplay is driven largely by considerations of geography and mathematics. In PolyAnagrams, by contrast, you play on an ordinary table. Your crossword grid can grow in any direction without limit, so gameplay is all about vocabulary and the desire to create as long a word as possible. But in Scrabble, you may often find that you have the letters needed for a promising word, but you can't lay it down because it would spill over an edge. The third major difference between PolyAnagrams and Scrabble is that words in Scrabble are much shorter. This is the prize-winning grid that secured the championship for Brett Smitheram in round 1 of the 2016 World Scrabble Championship in Fort Wayne, Indiana. This is a graphical representation of that winning game board. Notice that 6 of the 38 words highlighted in yellow had only 2 letters, and 16 shown in red had only 3 letters. In PolyAnagrams, they would not even have been allowed because the minimum word length is 4 letters. Notice that the 4 longest words in his championship grid had 8 letters each. I decided to look at my archives for games in which we had limited ourselves to words that were no longer than 8 letters. In this one, 44 out of the 47 words played had 8 letters. The only time we laid down shorter words was at the end of the game, when we were running out of letters. In another experiment, I played a round of Scrabble as solitaire on a simulated 15 by 15 game board, left hand versus right hand. I wanted to see how many long words I could create without paying attention to the edges or premium squares. Out of my 21 words, the longest 4 had only 6 letters each. Bottom line, it's not easy to create 8-letter words in Scrabble. Moving on, the fourth major difference between PolyAnagrams and Scrabble has to do with letter flow. In Scrabble, letters go from the stockpile onto the player's letter racks, and from there onto particular squares in the grid, where they must remain for the rest of the game. In PolyAnagrams, letters also flow from the stockpile onto the player's letter racks, as shown on the right-hand side of this diagram, and from there into the crossword grid. But as depicted on the left side, they may also go from the stockpile into a group of letters that are face up on the table, known as the bone pile, and from there into the grid. But as shown by the red arrow, letters may also flow the other way, from the grid back into the bone pile. This happens every time a player modifies an existing word and discards unneeded letters. The result of this constant back and forth is that any given letter can be used and reused many times during a game. This constant backflow of letters always causes the bone pile to grow larger than its standard 7 tiles, sometimes a lot larger. This example shows the state of play after the 23rd turn of an actual game that was played on the theme, music. The bone pile is holding 19 letters, so the next player will have 26 letters to choose from, these plus 7 on their letter rack. And if they take an existing word apart, they will be able to draw on all of its liberated letters as well. And they also get to choose which letter in which word they will use as their crossing point. This continual recycling and reuse of letters explains why the PolyAnagrams game set needs only 81 letter tiles. Scrabble, by contrast, has 100 letters, but you only have the 7 on your letter rack to work with. This is the final grid. The players had laid down 40 words, but only 10 of them remained at the end of the game. This is the score sheet. The 25 words with blue and red coloration followed the theme. The 5 that remained in the grid at the end of the game are the ones that are shown in red. That is what you can expect when you play PolyAnagrams. If you'd like to help spread the word about the game, the best way would be to give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Leaving a comment would help even more. YouTube will take notice as the numbers rise and will make the game more visible. Many thanks for watching.